Welcome in, everyone, to a new episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. How are you doing this week? Hope you're keeping well. All sorts of things going on up in the Scandinavian regions. We've had big results in the league. We've had teams play in Europe, some sensational scorelines in Europe again. And as ever, I'm joined by Jonathan Faduba. How has life been treating you this week, Jay?
Hi, Steve. Hi, everyone. Nice to be with you for this week's episode of the Nordic Football Podcast. It's good to be back. Obviously, last week, Steve, I had a few text messages, people saying they missed my voice, which is, I don't know if they were joking or not, to be honest, but it felt nice anyway, getting those messages. Good to be back. How have you been, my friend? I hear you've been putting a shift in, having a bit of a cheeky workout.
Yeah, I did message you this evening, and I think I rather surprised you by saying I was at the gym. I actually even sent a photo just to actually prove it, because some might not actually believe it. No, but I have been very busy. I was down in London last weekend, and then whenever the Champions League, it feels like these Champions League and Europa rounds now are busier than ever. There's so many more matches that there's no rest for me, Jonathan. I'm in demand so much, and there's so much football to access. So yeah, a hectic week, but that's never the worst thing. And yeah, firing up. I'm getting myself in training. I've been working on the upper body because I've not been able to obviously do much with my right ankle. So bit on the weight quite a lot.
And just confirm to the listeners, after you had this intense upper body workout, what did you do afterwards to did you have a protein shake maybe? To sort of after that, do you have chicken breasts, bit of protein? What was your meal of choice afterwards?
I was really hungry, right? So we went to the supermarket nearby, and I was just looking for a good deal, and there was a pizza which really tempted me, and I couldn't help myself. It was a spicy chicken pizza. It's £5.49 it cost as well. It's maybe like an award-winning pizza or something. You know how these shops do it. So anyway, I was actually intended to eat all of it. I'm not going to lie, but then realized it was one of these spicy ones, and I can never have a whole one of these, otherwise I'm getting flare-ups and everything. So I was a bit annoyed that I could only eat half the pizza, left the other half on top of the oven, and put a plate on top of it, cool it down, put it in the fridge later. And what happens? One of my cats has gone and eaten the other half of the pizza. He's eating the toppings of it. He's sat right next to me now, fast asleep, snoozing, clearly actually nice and full. So I've basically lost half a pizza, mate. But that might be not the worst thing for my figure.
You're one of the few men I've ever known who's gone to the gym and had an intense workout and then he topped it off with a giant pizza. So fair play to you, my friend. There's one thing I know about you, Steve. You're nothing if not original in your mind. So that did tickle me. I'm not going to lie. But let's get into the show. Obviously, we've had an intense week this week, like you said. These days, Steve, I mean, when I look at it's taken me half the week to look at the European schedule, to be honest. I started at the first game of the Champions League, and by the time I got to the last game of the Conference League, just looking at the schedule alone, it had been about 12 hours. But we got to start in Stockholm, and that is where we're going straight to on this episode. And the majority of this episode is going to look at the capital of Sweden, because there's not too much going on in Norway. You messaged me and said 3-0 nils. You don't have much to say about that. Europe, of course, we've got some big results to talk about later on in the show. But Steve, I implore you.
Well, yeah. Now I actually, it was on Sunday. I actually had a bet in this game. If there's one rule I always have in betting on Stockholm derbies, oppose Djurgården. I think I use the word in a write-up on my Telegram channel that they usually bottle these derbies, which is maybe a little bit harsh, but their record in them is not very good. So I was betting on Hammarby in this game, Hammarby against Djurgården last Sunday, and I was delighted. I mean, I was actually on the road last Sunday. I managed to watch a bit of the stream on the car ride down, and but I didn't manage to watch much of the second half. And then I kept following my live score ticker, and it was 2-0 to Hammarby, and it was like 90 plus 20 on Flash Score. I'm like, what's going on here? And then I thought, well, I might as well know. And there was some crowd disturbances. But what actually happened was, the match was obviously 76 minutes, wasn't it? I think initially. I was not watching live at that point. I mean, when was the last time actually a Stockholm derby didn't have any crowd disturbances at all? Like, there's usually about at least 5 minutes, isn't there? But this was obviously went to a completely different level. Jonathan, you're going to have to explain to the listeners exactly what's happened, what the fallout is. Paint us the full picture. Give us the Mona Lisa here.
I'll give you the Mona Lisa. I mean, you're right, Steve, to start with. I think we started... You know what? Funny enough, I was thinking last week, I'm pretty sure you said that we started this podcast in 2018. And you've missed out a year, my friend, because I believe we started this podcast in 2017. And it got me thinking, I want to listen to the first ever episode, but I haven't got around to... I don't know, can we even find that? I don't even know where I'll find it.
Yeah, of course you can. I'll find it, yeah.
I've got a feeling that Spotify...
More monikers than Clinton, it was called, do you remember?
Yeah, I don't think the first ever episode is on Spotify, though. I'm not sure.
Because we weren't on Spotify, no.
But anyway, subscribe to Spotify, by the way, if you haven't, or iTunes. But yeah, Steve, I can't remember. In the time we've been doing this podcast, I'm pretty sure you could count on one hand, and you might not even need all your fingers, but I'm pretty sure you could count on one hand the amount of times the game has actually started and finished to the exact schedule. But let me paint the picture, as you've mentioned, because this one is not only gone beyond the reach of kind of a brief stop or, waiting 10, 15 minutes for the game to restart after half time or because of smoke bombs and flares as we would normally have. This, Steve, has caused a national scandal. Now, to describe it in its exact form, the game pre-match, Steve, and this is where the big implications that we'll come to later. Pre-match, there was a rumor amongst the chatter anyway, where it's social media or wherever. The whisper in Stockholm was, this game is not going to be allowed to be finished if Hammarby are winning. Now, the context of that, we talked about it last week. Djurgården are in a bit of a crisis. I did mention at that last week's show. The joint managers are under a lot of pressure. We'll come to them as well soon. But the feeling with the Djurgården fans is they're not happy. This season's not been going their way, and they're very dissatisfied. And their feeling was they've fallen away. AIK, they were well clear of them at this, in the summer, for example, and even they've caught them up in the table now. And the feeling amongst the Djurgården fans and the whisper was, if we're losing another Stockholm derby, we're going to make sure this game doesn't end. We're going to do whatever it takes. So going into the match, the police were fully aware, and both sides were fully aware that there was the potential for disruption if things didn't go Djurgården's way. Now, we start with a game, Steve. I mean, like you said, you were following it. Started amazingly well for Hammarby. Nahir Basara stepping up in the derby. He said he'll bleed for the shirt, and he didn't need to bleed for the shirt, but he smashed in an absolute golazzo early on to put them one up and scored a second. Of course, I had noticed he's your fantasy captain, so I'm pretty sure you'll be grinning about that one. But yeah, he turned up in the derby, had a brilliant game. It's 2-0 Hammarby, Steve. Second half, the game's sort of carrying on, and there's whispers, obviously, as I mentioned, that what might happen if Djurgården fans are unhappy. And lo and behold, exactly what people thought would happen happened, Steve. So essentially, they started to chuck on flares and try and disrupt the game, and that's really what they did. They decided to start throwing things onto the stadium, onto the pitch. The police had to stop the match, and what they did, Steve, is they stopped the game. The fireworks and the bangers and things like that went off. The refereeing team stopped the game, and the players left the field. Then during the break, they took away all the banners and everything like that. Everyone assumed that it was a kind of like a protest maybe going on from the Djurgården section. So the game stopped, Steve, at 3:36 Swedish time, I believe. It took an hour later for the game to restart. At this point, I was like, I wasn't watching the game, but I was looking at the score, and it was like 90+1 or something like that, I think. It said on my app. And I checked them again about 20 minutes later, and it was still 90+1. And I'm thinking, well, what's going on here? And An hour later, Steve, the word came that the game will be completed, but it was announced by the match delegate Hans Larsson that the game will be finished with no audience. So essentially, Steve, the police give a mandate, don't they, for events? There's one thing I learned at my MBA. We had a module about stadium events and who's responsible for matches, and it's actually really complicated. And essentially, the CEO of a football club actually plays a massive role in cancellation of matches. They are final decision makers at a certain point during the protocols, but obviously the police are the main ones. The police decided they were so angry about what had gone on that what they said is the license to host, because obviously when you organize a football match, you have to get a license, right, to be able to host it. And the match lasts 90 minutes, right, as normal. So you have a license for, say, I don't know, 4 or 5 hours. The police essentially said, we're no longer licensing this game. This public event is now over. So instead of sort of completing the game as would normally happen, the police decided, I'm sorry, we're not giving any license for this game to finish, which is quite rare, to be honest, because normally, even if there's a delay, you give a bit of extenuating circumstances, if you get what I mean. But the police were like, no, sorry, we're no longer licensing this game. So the police withdrew the permit, basically. So it's no longer a public event. So they had to turn around and say, everyone has to go home. Now, Steve, when I did this module on my MBA, well, the one thing I learned, and this is from like someone who works in Scottish football, he's been the CEO of a championship club. He was like, the one thing you don't want to do, if you can avoid it, is evacuate a stadium while the game is still like not been finished, because it will cause complete chaos. And it's actually a bigger safety issue than if you just sort of finish the match, because everyone leaving is more of a safety issue than like just finishing the game, even if there's an incident inside the stadium. So that is a major decision in itself, to sort of say, like, listen, everyone can go home. We're not playing this game with any audience. Obviously, as you can imagine, Steve, it caused a massive issue. But what happened, Steve, then is the police wrote on their website saying that they couldn't guarantee the safety of the people in the stadium any longer. And so any other measures they could implement would be insufficient. So they said they can't guarantee the safety of this public event. Therefore, we're no longer sanctioning it continuing. However, Steve, as you can imagine, it's a Stockholm derby. Hammarby are flying. They're winning the derby, Steve. They want to rub it in. You've seen the banners from the season, earlier in the season, you know, that they unveiled and things like that, that middle finger banner. They're loving it. They're not going home. So the Hammarby fans start singing, we're not going home. We're not going anywhere. So you can imagine, Steve, they're trying to evacuate a stadium. And the Hammarby fans are there singing, we're not going anywhere. We're not going anywhere. And anyway, it's just total chaos because no one can leave. A press officer came out then at 5:30 and told them, well, a press officer said everyone has to leave. At 5:30, they switched off the arena, Steve. Lights off, everything. Fans are still in the stadium. So then they announce that the game's going to finish, but it will be played the next day at 2 p.m., Steve, on a Monday in front of an empty crowd. So 20 minutes later, 5:50, Steve, this is a full 2 hours after the game was supposed to end. Hammarby players come out onto the pitch and they thank the supporters, and essentially the game ends. Now, I know you're going to have your opinion on this and we're going to get to it in a minute, and I'm interested to hear your take. But basically, Steve, this is not a good thing to do. And one of the reasons why it's not a good thing to do is the comments from Kim Hellberg, the manager of Hammarby. And of course, we've had David Salini, the assistant manager, on the podcast before. Kim Hellberg came out after the match, Steve, and he was visibly like distraught. Like he looked gutted. And to be honest, he's got a point. They're winning the derby. This is like a massive, he's the new manager. This is a huge moment. They're second in the league. Djurgården, they've knocked them out of the title race as well, don't forget. They can't even win the league anymore. And the thing is, Steve, we've got another backstory to come into this in a minute, which I'll get to, a side story, because the Djurgården managers know if they lose this game, they're getting the sack. So the press conference the press release is already written, Steve, for after the match. So if they're finishing, they've got to come back on Monday and finish the game. They already know they're getting sacked. So that's an added layer to this chaos, right? You're coming back to finish a match. You might not even, they should have just not turned up. Maybe they wouldn't have been sacked because, the game's not finished technically. So anyway, Kim Hellberg comes out and he says, this is a disgrace for the future of Swedish football. Because he said, everybody knows, I'm going to quote him directly because I don't want to get it wrong. He said, this is a difficult day for Swedish football. It's obvious that the team has decided to do something that we already knew about yesterday. I understand if the police don't want to play with the public, we can accept that. However, that Swedish football and Djurgården think it's okay to come back tomorrow and finish the match, I think is a mortal danger for Swedish football. So what his point is essentially is that, and I think he's got a good point here, and I want to get your opinion on it. He's basically saying that they should have been awarded the points, and his reasoning is he's saying if Djurgården know that they can disrupt the game at 2-0 down, get it called off till tomorrow with no fans. I mean, that technically, when they come back and play it, Hammarby are the home team. That's an advantage for Djurgården. Not only that, they've got to come back. Everyone's got to come back the next day and finish the match. So he was basically fuming. And in the days that followed, I'll let you come in a second, but just in the days that followed, Steve, this has gone like haywire in Sweden. First, the sports minister came out and went mad. He came out and slammed everything, rightly so as well. So it's gone to the top, basically, Steve. Obviously, the chairman came out, Djurgården chairman came out. Everyone's fuming. The Hammarby fans, Hammarby club, the organisation fuming. This has even gone, Steve, to the Prime Minister of Sweden. The Prime Minister of Sweden has come out and said, it is completely unacceptable that the stands have become a haven for violence that we would never accept anywhere else. So, long story short, Steve, the proverbial you know what has hit the fan in this game, and it raises all kinds of issues, because what I'm going to say now, obviously, Malmo haven't won the league. I know we'll get to that later, but Steve, Malmo are playing IFK Gothenburg this weekend, and they know that if they win, they're champions. And there's already rumours saying IFK Gothenburg, the fans, have come out and said, we're not letting this game end if we're losing. So what's going to happen then? And Malmo are going to have to then come back the next day and play the game. Like you just mentioned, we've got European matches. Like it opens up a massive can of worms. So safe to say, Steve, I mean, I know we've talked about Stockholm Syndrome, but this is something that, as I've said, and I'll just make my final point on this, like we've been doing this podcast for years, and every single Stockholm derby is pretty much the same. It stops for some reason. It is getting a bit ridiculous now. You know, what was the game at the weekend? I think Liverpool-Chelsea in the Premier League. Can you imagine if Liverpool-Chelsea had to be finished on the Monday in front of no fans? Like, it is not a good look, right? If you're trying to grow a league.
I'm just going back to the
long story short, Steve, it's all hit the fan.
I'm just going back to the write-up I did in my Telegram channel about this bet, and I finished it off by saying, I can guarantee that there will be some crowd disturbances here and delays in the game. I mean, that's just a given. I am sick to death of this now. Like, this is getting ridiculous. Like, it feels to me like any of the fans of these Stockholm clubs cannot accept losing, right, in good grace. And yeah, especially, I mean, I don't want to pick on anyone, but Djurgården fans seem the worst for it, probably because of their record in the derbies. Like, whenever something goes wrong, the thing is, right, it's a big day for Hammarby. They were 2-0 up. Who knows what would have happened? Maybe Djurgården might have come back in the last 15 minutes, but it looked like Hammarby were going to win. Their fans deserve that moment. The players deserve that moment in these. You know, this is football. You enjoy your good days, but you've also got to take defeat on the chin. I'm sorry, you just have to. And I think these fans are getting a bit spoilt now. And you're right, what the Hammarby manager said there. This sets a very dangerous precedent that fans now believe that they can impact when a game finishes. And if a match cannot be completed on the day because of crowd disturbances, then absolutely a team should be awarded the point straight up. There you go. If it happens after 20 minutes and their team are winning, the opposition should be awarded the points. But I'm sick of this now. Like, it happens every single time. I mean, if you were going to plan to watch one of these games, you'd have to book off the whole afternoon, wouldn't you? Like 5-6 hours, because I mean, one of these days I want to do these derbies. But here's a question for you: how close are we? Are we at a stage where, for a whole season, all these Stockholm derbies need to be played behind closed doors? Is that the only way to solve this?
No, I don't want that, because I mean, you look at France, Steve, and you know me, you and I are both fond French football. It's where we first met, Steve. But I hate it when the derbies have like one section has no fans, or there's not even any fans. Like fans are the lifeblood of football, aren't they? At the end of the day, it's a real shame. And if there's one good thing about Swedish football, in terms of the quality, I always say the quality might not be the best. You're always going to get young talents. That's why I love the league. But one of the other aspects of it, these big games, Steve, the atmosphere is proper. Do you know what I mean? I've said to people, to me, it's like Germany, really. It's like a mini Germany in some ways. Like the big games, you got the atmosphere and everything, the banter, like you love it. But it's like you just said there, to be honest, it's really difficult because you don't want to go in too much in Djurgården fans, but they are just naturally, because they lose most of the derbies. Like naturally, they're the most angry fans mostly on derby days, of 9 times out of 10. I mean, you'll probably have the record of.
I mean, the worst losers in football that I know of. I mean, they just can't seem to take it now.
No, but come on, let's face it. It could equally be either. AIK have done similar.
Yeah, I think all of the sets of fans are guilty. They are. This cannot continue.
I forget your question now, to be honest.
Well, here's a question, right? 2 questions, right? I mean, first of all, I said, are we at a stage where next season, like all the matches need to be behind closed doors, no fans whatsoever, or what's another solution then? What are the authorities got to do about this? What can they do? What would be your answer here?
Well, that is the $1 million question. The thing is, and I think the most dangerous thing is, Kim Helber basically admitted that he knew this was going to happen, right? And Djurgården have come out and said they knew about it as well, but they couldn't maybe identify the fans. So that automatically gives the fans power. Now, there's a big thing in Swedish football, Steve. The fans do not like the police. They feel the police are overly heavily handed. And that's another debate, because we love, for example, I mean, the AIK game the next day, Steve. You should have seen the flares and stuff going off in the crowd. I mean, they're supposed to be banned, but they can't. The police can't control it. The fans do what they want pretty much, which I quite love. But it can be deemed a safety risk to a certain extent as well. I mean, if you've got asthma in that stand, you're screwed. You know what I mean? For example, and so the police are trying to be like heavy-handed, but the fans think the police are overly heavy-handed. That creates there's a massive hostility between fans and clubs. That's police. So it's a real delicate balance, because if you take that away, then you can't play Swedish football behind closed doors. You'd lose something. To answer your question, I guess we're heading to a point where, is it going to be points deductions? Look at the table now. I mean, this game shouldn't have been replayed, in my opinion, especially with so late in the match. They should. I don't know the exact regulations, but clearly you would suggest, why don't they just end the game then? Let Hammarby enjoy their win. It's a 3-0 default win, and you're done. But I guess there might be things like, you don't know exactly who's throwing the flares. Maybe you don't know from what section it is. There could be controversy from that point of view. A fan could dress up as a Hammarby fan and go into the home section and chuck something.
Yeah, that is very true.
I've always thought that with, say, racism. I remember the Patrice Evra, Luis Suarez thing, and people said, well, you should, anyone found guilty, and if a fan's found guilty of racism, the team should get points deducted. But my argument was always, well, I could just dress up as a Liverpool fan, go to Anfield, start abusing someone, and Liverpool get deducted 10 points, and my team wins the league. So that's difficult. But I think, to answer your question anyway, in summary, I think they're going to have to start coming up with sanctions in terms of maybe points deductions, or partial stadium closures like they have in Italy or France. I think that's the only way they're really going to resolve that. But I think relative to the standard of the league, I think in Sweden you'd lose a lot more, because the standard of the league is not as good as, say, France or Germany. So the incentive to watch the league would be massively reduced without fans. So it's a real dilemma, and I think the fans have to think about it as well. But I'm always if it's fans v police, Steve, I'm going to be on the side of fans at the end of the day. Like, I got an empathy for fans, but it gets to a point where you're like, well, you got to question it. I mean, what do you think?
I think they've got to have strict guidelines in place, right? So everyone knows if they've got to come up with something, and like, if that happens, the outcome is going to be that. Now, personally, what I would do, I would not have any away fans next year in any of the derbies. I would be, or maybe a token 100 or something, like they do in Marseille, PSG. Put 100 to the top of the stands, and that's it. You're in. And I think that's the best sort of short-term solution, because this. I mean, it's awful to say that just for a season, and then you know what happens? Fans are sort of get a bit disheartened about you know, they yearn to go back in there again. Maybe they might behave themselves next time. It's a bit extreme, and I wouldn't had, you know, you do lose a bit of atmosphere, but you know, that's the way it goes. In terms of the flares, I just want to say something about the flares. I don't get why. I'm not a big fan of flares. I've got to be honest. I don't get why they have to do it in a football stadium. Like, if you come on, you're coming in to watch the bloody football, aren't you? And the atmosphere, and put your tifos out. I mean, I was watching a bloody Conference League game on Thursday, St. Gallen against Fiorentina, and the Fiorentina fans were letting off these stupid flares, like purple smoke or whatever. And I'm like, and it was like the game had to be stopped. I'm like, what is the actual point of it? I don't get it. I really don't, Jonathan. It's a European culture thing, but
I do like a good flare, but I know what you mean though.
Yeah, they're starting to annoy me. The older I've got, the more annoyed I am with them, I think. And if I did have breathing problems, that would really piss me off in a stadium, I've got to be honest. So I'm like, what is the bloody point? But anyway, there was the drama's obviously not finished, because, I mean, heading into the weekend, there were rumours about the Djurgården joint managers, that they were under significant pressure. So we're at a stage where, you know, I think the general consensus was if they lose the game, they're probably out of a job. So, I mean, they're 2-0 down after 76 minutes. There's 14 minutes left to be played on Monday. I mean, was it a situation where if they came back and won, did they have literally 14 minutes left to save their jobs? Or was it done and dusted then? Because this was a pretty quick announcement, wasn't it, on the Monday, that the end of an era. I mean, they've won a title with Djurgården. They've had some good times here. Did they win a cup as well, maybe? You know, they had a good run. But for it to end before the season's finished is a bit of a strange timing, really, Jonathan. Tell us about this, the dual manager sacking.
It's been on the cards, to be honest, Steve. I mean, the first thing we have to mention is they won the league in their first year in charge. So they've been successful, but they've been there 6 years. I think it was maybe coming to a natural conclusion. And yeah, like you said, I mean, it's the game that lasted 24 hours pretty much nearly. They came back, played the last bit in front of nobody. And then as soon as the game ended, it was pretty much announced an hour later, sacking. So it did prolong the misery for them. I feel for them, really. I mean, that's the sort of that. If they talk about the sword of Damocles, Steve, I think that's the 24-hour sword of Damocles, just knowing what's going to come. I mean, who knows? What if they turn it around and won 3-2? I mean, imagine if that happened though. Seriously, that would be the mother of all scams. I mean, imagine.
Well, I had people messaging me, right, who followed this bet I was on, and be like, some bookmakers hadn't paid out. I mean, someone asking, do I void the bet? What happens? And usually, what happens with most books is if a match gets continued within 24 hours, the bet stands and everything like that. So, yeah, there's a situation where, you know, it's a completely different game the next day, 14 minutes plus injury time. And yeah, what if they had turned it around? Would they have kept their jobs? I mean, we'll never know, will we? But
I think the statement was already written. I mean, they'll have to delete it off the website. But imagine I mean, Kim Hellberg was fuming and they won. Imagine if they came back and had drawn or lost.
Yeah.
You know, Djurgården fans would have been absolutely loving it. They would have basically got pulled off the magic upset. They should get the play. They should get the win bonus. But yeah, it was then announced, obviously, that they've taken the decision to part ways. There can be a discussion about the joint managers. I think history will probably vindicate them a little bit. Like they have done some good things, like I say, winning the title. But there's been a sort of slow, in my opinion, there's just been a slow kind of drip
decline
kind of decline in the last probably 18 months, maybe, in the sense of they've always got a promising team, Steve. They're always kind of like maybe first or second. They start well. And then they just sort of like take their eye off the ball. They lose sloppy games. They don't win the derbies, which I said creates a huge amount of pressure on them. There's always a bit of a scandal. You know, the joint managers, they've been involved in a few ruckuses, you know, for example, getting sent off, you know, on the stands and things like that. I think Kim Bergström in particular, you know, at times he can be a bit volatile. Thomas Lagerlöf is a bit more calm. He's a bit like Thomas Frank, he reminds me of in terms of how he looks and things like that. He's a bit more calm. But yeah, I mean, the statement came out. Sports director Boss Anderson said, we wish them all the best. It should be respected, the amount of achievements they've had. And, you know, they've done well in Europe, for example. They had some great results in Europe and achievements in Europe that they'll look back fondly on, I think, the fans. but it probably was a case of they were probably going to go at the end of the season anyway, with a year left on their contracts. It seemed like that was in the air. And I think the disgrace of this derby, Steve, it was felt like maybe they just got to act. And, I think the Hammarby win was not predictable in this game, but it felt like it was coming, definitely. I think that was a good shout from you. And I think it's just an air of like, this isn't really going anywhere. They're out of the title race now, fresh start next season. But the other thing is, Steve, here, the other part of this Stockholm debate that we've got to have is what happens to the sporting director. Because, Steve, have you ever heard a player? I don't think I've ever seen a player come out and slam a sporting director of another team. Have you? You don't get banter like that. You don't get banter in the Premier League. I mean, I've never heard, I don't know, Bruno Fernandes come out and start slating Edu or something on, like for his transfers. This is what happened in Sweden after the derby, Steve. So Fredrik Hammar has come out after the derby and said, as long as Bosse Andersson is the manager, is the sporting director of Djurgården, they will not win any derby. Talk about banter. I mean, Hammar put on a T-shirt, by the way, after the game. He had a T-shirt with the picture of that the middle finger tifo from earlier in the season that was revealed of Kent. He came out and said, I had a good feeling about this game, so I put that under the shirt. I had it on yesterday, but I had to wait a day to reveal it. Obviously, he had to reveal it to nobody because there was no one there. But he said, the way that they silenced our supporters, it all was very dirty. I think once you win, you should be allowed to celebrate. So there's a lot of banter going on, Stephen. He's come out and said,
exactly. That's what I think. If you win,
let me just finish the quotes. Let me just finish the quotes. They said he was asked after the game, who were you aiming this shirt at? And he said directly, I'm aiming at Djurgården and the sporting director, Bosse Andersson. It's like WWE wrestling. It's like grabbing the mic and sort of pointing at the camera and going, Bosse Andersson, I want to talk to you. And he basically said he stood behind my back before the last derby and was talking and talking. And he said that if Hammar has the ball, we will win the derby. But we won that derby, and we won this derby. And as long as Bosse Andersson is sporting director of Djurgården, we will continue to win the derby. So this is like explosive. I don't know what's in the water in Stockholm, Steve, but it's all kicking off. So the big question now is what happens to Bosse Andersson, because that has started to perpetuate. People are starting to question him and his transfers and his manager decisions. Now, my personal opinion, Steve, I think Bosse Andersson's been a good sporting director at Djurgården. He gets good players like Lucas Bergvall, who we quote from Bomber and has sold to Tottenham, pretty much instantly, made a good profit. I think he's done a decent job, but that is the next part of this debate. It's not just the managers are gone. Now it's like a look at the whole organization of Djurgården, Steve. Like I said, we could talk all night about Stockholm. It's all kicked off, basically.
Yeah, I don't know what's in the water in Stockholm, but it wouldn't be as good as Yorkshire water. You would probably agree to that. Yeah, I mean, just going back, I've just looked back at the league positions since they took over. 2019 league champions, then a fourth place, third, second, fourth, and fourth. A Swedish Cup final in 2022, I think it was. 23-24, lost on penalties to Malmo. It's not a bad run, is it? I mean, before they came in, Djurgården had a pretty poor run in the early sort of 2010s. They were lucky to be in the top half of the table, so they've done well. I think the problem is, well, not a problem, it's a good thing. There's a lot of ambition. All the teams in Stockholm have high ambition, and they all want to win the league. And, the silver medal isn't enough. They're now, 5 years, 6 years without winning the league title, and they'll want more. And I guess my final question with the managers is, why now? Why not wait until the end of the season? There's only, 3 games left plus the Conference League, which they've been doing all right in. So why now? Why did the managers have to go now? I found that a little bit strange. They'd already got the interim manager in place before the fixture versus Vitória Guimarães on Thursday night. I watched that game, and they weren't that bad, actually, Djurgården, in fairness, but strange timing.
Yeah, it's a great question, and I have to give a shout out to one of our followers on Twitter, Steve, or X, or whatever you want to call it these days, the Elon Musk Show, at Nordic Footpod. Give it a follow while that account, before that website burns down to the ground. But Pietro Michieletto, I hope I've pronounced it right, at Pietro Michi, he said, and I believe he's a Djurgården fan, possibly or I could be wrong, but he said we had 15 points more than AIK 3 months ago, and we've managed to exit the top 3 from then. Shameful. And I think you made some good points on the Twitter account, actually. And, like I say, anyone who listens to this show, follow us, give your opinions. I'd love to know, for example, what do you think about what should be done about the crowd trouble? Do you have any other thoughts on it? I'd love to get different perspectives. So do tweet us and let us know your opinions on that debate. But I think that is the opinion of the fans, Steve. It's like they were so far ahead of like AIK. Hammarby have had a resurgence this season, Steve. They're going to finish second, pretty much guaranteed. And I think that, well, it's not guaranteed actually, but it's guaranteed that they're the only ones that can stop Malmo now. So Hammarby are second, AIK are third, Djurgården have fallen down to fourth with 3 games remaining. And I think that's the feeling, really. If it was like, say, Häcken and, like when it was Häcken last year challenging, or, other teams, Elfsborg, I don't think Djurgården are as disappointed to not win the title or not be challenging. But when you're that many points clear of like AIK, and then with 3 games to go, you're behind them, that hurts, Steve. Especially when you can't win a derby, those games are psychological. They have a massive impact on the city. They're huge matches. And I just think I think that's perpetuated, the inability to sort of consistently win derbies. I just think that's created a feeling of like, well, if we're not going to win the league and we're not going to win these derbies, Europe's only going to satisfy us for so long. And they could have waited till the end of the season. I agree with you. I'm not sure if there's maybe something behind the scenes, but there'd already been whispers that they're going to get released. So I feel like maybe it's just something's gone on behind the scenes. We don't
pressure as well.
Yeah, the pressure is really pressure. That's why it's happened. I mean, just to finish off, there's a lot of rumors that they approached already. Boss Anderson already approached Per-Matti Sogmo for the job. Reports that he's turned the job down. I don't know if those are true or not or confirmed, but obviously the former Häcken manager who won a title with Häcken, of course. It's a good job, the Djurgården job. I mean, I think it would be attractive to a lot of managers. It's a big stadium. You've got a big club, like you said, Steve. That's that ambition. Not won a league for a few years now, and just to wrap up this Stockholm debate, Steve. I know it's quite a Stockholm heavy pod, but we don't often talk about Stockholm. To be fair, Gothenburg gets a lot of talk, but I think they deserve a good 40 minutes on this episode. This lays the foundation, Steve, for next season, because Hammarby are now back. And I said it this season, I think they'd have a good season, but I didn't think they would finish second or be like second or be the only ones to challenge Malmo now with 3 games left. I don't think they're going away with these joint managers. I think they have set a proper foundation, Steve. They're a proper team. I've seen them play live, and I think that as long as they don't go crazy with their recruitment, which they tend to do every year, if they can keep some of their key men, Basara is the spiritual leader of that club. He's a real leader of that team, like he did in this derby, Steve. And then we've got a resurgent AIK. Now, Oiko have not been around for a while, but under this manager, and you called it because he's come from your league. You said he's a bit of a sly dog, this one, and keep an eye on him, and he has propelled them to the top 3. When they were we were looking at them as maybe relegation candidates under Henning Berg. So you've got them back. You've got AIK potentially back, depending on how maybe recruitment. I know they've got some financial issues and stuff to resolve, but I mean, if Djurgården get a good manager, Steve, we could be looking at a proper Stockholm tussle next season for the top maybe 3 or 4 places. So watch this space in that city. Well, it's about to, as they say, Steve, it's about a bit like your pizza. It's about to get spicy.
Yeah, not half cooked either, or half eaten. I agree. I think if Malmo lose Henrik Rydström, which is always possible, then Hammarby or AIK look like the next champion in the waiting, really. Even if Rydström stays. Because Malmo, I mean, we'll talk about Malmo on another episode, but Hammarby do look very, very good. Interesting thing with Mikael Thomasson at AIK, he could finish the season, right, with the 2 clubs that he's managed, Fredrikstad and AIK, they could both get a medal. Like Fredrikstad are in the mix in the top 3 in Eliteserien. So he could finish the season saying, do you know what? The 2 teams I managed finished in the top 3 in Eliteserien and Allsvenskan, which would be crazy, really. He fits the bill perfectly there. I said it before, 1-0 sort of merchant, focuses on defense. And if they get it right, AIK always a team I would trust more than Hammarby to actually win something down the years. So if they get the right deals, I could see him winning the league with them, and then he'll move on somewhere else. But a lot can happen in the winter. Well done to Hammarby. Second place now. They only need 7 more points. They've got such a good goal difference that 7 more points will get them a silver medal, which is excellent for them. Malmo look like they're going to win the league soon, and it's going to be very, very interesting indeed. So, AIK, they are up to third place now after. I mean, they've had a great run of results. Just looking back now, I think it's something like 6 wins in the last. Going back anyway, they beat IFK Göteborg 2-1 away from home at the weekend. And you got a few things to say about this game, haven't you? A very, very well. There was a late equaliser and then a late winner from the big man at the back.
Yeah, Steve, I want to talk about this. And you know what it is? I don't know if it's because I watched Monday Night Football and they were debating set pieces. They had, I think, Aaron Ramsey on the show, Jamie Carragher. And obviously in the Premier League, there's been a lot of talk about set pieces. They analysed Bournemouth. I don't know. Did you see Bournemouth's goal against Arsenal? The set piece.
No, I didn't.
Bournemouth scored a corner that it was a brilliant set piece routine to beat Arsenal. And obviously Arsenal have been dubbed the sort of set piece kings, haven't they, lately because of how good they've become at set pieces. But Bournemouth came up with a brilliant one. But Steve, watch this AIK winning goal back. Now, I think this is a set piece routine. And I said it at the time on Twitter. I said I think this has been I put a question out on Twitter. I think this has been worked on the training ground. A few people agreed. I want to give a shout out to @Nororts because he's always a supporter of the pod for many years. AIK fan. He's always does quite well at fantasy as well as Svenskan. And he posted a quote from Bursa Anselina saying that they have a routine around set pieces for the goal. And you obviously, you know the manager, so you'll know a little bit more about his history in terms of set pieces, maybe in Norway. But Steve, what I liked about this set piece, right? There's a little bit before it happens. The player who takes the set piece, it's on the halfway line. They play it down the line. This is the last minute of the game. They get a cross in, and it's headed home, and that wins the game in a big game against EFK, of course, which was catastrophic for EFK in terms of losing another late goal. But if you watch it, the defender, Steve, I can't remember who it is, but the referee, the taker of the set piece, he moves the ball forward a few yards before he takes it, and as he does that, that drags out the AFK defender because he moves towards the ball to sort of like complain, and the referee points to him and says like, move the ball back. So he moves the ball back, but the defender is so concentrated on that little move 5 yards, he doesn't spot the run behind him. He plays it down the flank, the cross comes in, and it's headed home. And I think that's deliberate. Now, I don't know if you've had a chance to watch this, but
I'm watching it now.
I thought it was brilliant. The little just set piece, the little just trick that pulls away the defender from his marking job, which his job was to mark the man and stop the cross. But he comes forward a few yards, and because of that, he can't get back in time. And to me, when I watched that, I was like, that's a deliberate move, because it creates the space. He has acres of space to put a left foot across in, and it's headed home. Obviously, that part of it is maybe not planned, but I thought that the decision to sort of like delay the kick and like get the referee's attention and all that and get a complaint, that distracted of course defender. Either way, even if it wasn't a routine, the defender has not cost his team, but he's got done there because he's come out completely distracted and not tracked his man. But I thought that was a set piece routine. Nororts came out and actually said, he posted a quote from Selena saying that they do work on those set pieces, but to me that looked like a deliberate little bit of trickery. And if it was, I'd say hats off to AIK. And on this Stockholm episode, Steve, we've got to give a shout out to them because they are flying.
Yeah, I've just looked at this and I think it is very. I mean, the thing with set pieces, there's so many times it's not going to work, and you've got to accept that. But what the other option would have been just to lump it into the box, try and cause a bit of havoc, and it's probably going to be a foul, isn't there? That's how it often works. A foul against the attacking team. So I've got to say, the ball in. I don't know who's put that ball in. That is a delicious cross.
Yeah,
really good cross. What I don't like, and I'm sorry here, I don't like the goalkeeping at all. I think the goalkeeper doesn't know where to come, and I think he actually should save the header anyway. A really good keeper saves that header.
Who is on the ball? Who is the defender? I think it was.
Well, it's not great defending. He nearly gets back, doesn't he? But
you got a shirt number?
No, I can't get a shirt number either. It's not amazing defending in the middle,
We
really.
won't name
Tiedemann's a
them.
big
We
lad.
won't call them out by name, but I think he's been done there. But yeah, great cross from Selena. Obviously headed in by Hansen. And by the way, he came out after the match and said, and I enjoyed his quotes afterwards. He said, like, this is why I came to AIK for games like this. Like, he seems to be loving it since he joined AIK. And they just seem like a club on the up again. And listen, Steve, Stockholm could be the place to be next season. There's a lot of storylines.
Yeah,
that's if they're allowed any fans into the stadium.
I think Stockholm is definitely a place to be next year. I think I do actually think one of the teams will be the champion next year from Stockholm. That's the way I see it. These things go in cycles. I just want to move now into the European matches because, I mean, the crazy thing is, right? A lot of the teams in Scandinavia have really done their countries proud this year, and a big shout out actually to Vikingur Reykjavik, and the first ever Icelandic team to win a league phase game. Beat Circle Bruges at the weekend. Even teams, we had the team from the Faroe Islands last year did well, KI. But Elfsborg, I mean, they're 7th place in Allsvenskan, but you wouldn't know it based on their European performances. They beat Roma. They put up a very good fight against AZ, and they put up a very, very good fight against Galatasaray. I think there's some tremendous managers in Allsvenskan, by the way. And this is another manager who caught my eye in more ways than one, as I said before. They've been this real plucky team, Elfsborg, in Europe this season. I mean, how can you explain the discrepancies between their domestic form and the European?
Well, firstly, put your man crush away there, Steve. I know you got a bit of a soft spot for this manager, but I think it's a simple explanation, really. It's Europe, isn't it? I mean, a team like Elfsborg playing like Roma, Galatasaray. These are big. I think they just get up for that game. It happens a lot, doesn't it, Steve? And this is why Malmo tend to always win the league. A lot of the time, because the teams that challenge them, once they get into Europe, they can't do the back-to-back games, and they're so up for the European matches that when they then they come back to domestic game, they just don't have the squad to rotate. I mean, Hildemark, to be fair to him, he has rotated quite a lot this season with his teams. Baidu came off in the Galatasaray game. He tends to rotate his best players quite often, and they've got a decent squad. But this game was wild. I mean, it looked like, I think I tweeted before the game started, Victor Osimhen and Icardi against Elfsborg. What a time to be alive, because, you're looking at it and the Galatasaray team was like...
I thought it'd be 6-0, something like that. I thought they'd get murdered.
They did the first half. I mean, it was 3-0 and they got absolutely destroyed. You're thinking, well, this is game over. But fair play to them. They changed a few things, tweaked a few things around, came out with a renewed intensity. And like you said, the manager has to take credit for that, in my opinion, because you could easily just, wash your hands of the game and kind of like just wrap it up. They really fought back well, Steve. And they came back into the game twice, took it to within one goal. But eventually quality shown through, and, fair play to Galatasaray. They got the job done. But I have to say that even though they lost this game 4-3, Icardi was a Pettersson on goal. Pettersson made quite a few saves, although one or two incidents maybe was a bit of fault at, but Yilmaz and then Akgun. But Nicholas Hult, Baidu penalty, and then Larson as well scored in the 92nd minute. It was a really, really entertaining game. Both sides went for it. I mean, Hult's goal, Steve, for example, was a brilliantly worked team move. Absolutely carved Galatasaray open. So hats off to them. I mean, you said that you don't think Malmo will win the league next year. I mean, that's on record now, but they're not doing amazingly in Europe, are they? But
I watched them.
Still seem to be enjoying themselves. And by the way, I know this is a very Stockholm, Sweden focused episode, but Steve, what about the Norwegian teams? Got to say something about Glimt.
Yes, the thing is, I actually think the Portuguese league is a good league at the minute. I know Benfica lost in midweek and all that, but I think Sporting are exceptional. I think Porto are very good, and Braga are normally very, very good in European football.
Just to interrupt you, and like a very sort of like, it's a very big tangent. Do you think Amorim at Sporting could be the next Man City manager?
What I don't understand is why he's still there, because he's been linked with about every big club in the book. Probably below like top tier. Because
is he waiting for
the really big one?
They're excellent.
I think that. I think there's two things about Sport. They are by far and I don't think people understand this, they're by far the best Portuguese side. They are a lot better than Benfica, and they're a lot better than Porto at the moment. They're massively helped by one man, Victor Gyökeres, who is sensational. But it's not. But take that away, they are really, really well coached. I think this manager will go somewhere big. But I'm just surprised that he hasn't moved on yet. I think that's got to be a personal decision, really, because I mean, Spurs wanted him, didn't they? I think it feels like every sort of team below the real. I mean, Liverpool were linked at one point. I really do like what I see from Sporting, and Portuguese football is on the rise. I think again. I mean, I'll talk about Grimaris in a minute. They look quite good. But anyway, so this just shows you how good a win for Buda Glimt to go to Braga and win 2-1. I think it's hats off. Like, that is as good a win. And they've beaten Porto at home as well. Although anyone can lose in the Arctic Circle, Jonathan. Anyone's vulnerable there. But, I mean, they went to Braga and they gave a very good account of themselves. And I think, a draw, to be fair, would have been probably fair, the overall outcome. This was played randomly on a Wednesday at 3:30 UK time. I still don't know why that match was played so early. There probably was a reason which I overlooked. The Galatasaray game
at the same time. Galatasaray was the same time as well.
I think Galatasaray, the thing was they didn't want. Fenerbahce and Man U was the next day, so I think that had to be separated up. But in terms of the actual match and how it went, I think Glimt were well worthy of a point, but they nicked it with a last-minute header from a corner, another set piece. We talk about set piece goals. Nielsen. Who not a lot of people have heard about him. Villads Nielsen, a new signing this season from one of the Danish teams, pops up with a goal which is probably worth about, $500,000? Is that how much you get for winning a Europa League game? Something like that. And they're on 7 points now in the table. I mean, they would be very disappointed now not to actually qualify for the next round of the Europa League. And they really, they could even be looking towards the top 8 to get in automatically. They're in 9th place at the moment. I still think just to qualify really would be excellent. And if they could finish, say, even 9th to 16th, that would get them a home leg second in the playoff round. Fantastic.
We've got the small matter of a trip to Old Trafford coming in about a month's time, which I'm going to hopefully try and get tickets to. So if anyone's listening to this and wants to offer me a ticket, please do. Manchester United, Buda Glimt. But I think that will be a fairly comfortable 3 away points at this rate, Steve.
I don't know. They're just looking at the next fixtures. They've got Karabag at home. That should be a win. Karabag don't travel very well in general in Europe, and they've got and then they're Man United away. I mean, you've probably got to think they lose that really, but they've got Maccabi Tel Aviv. I'm not sure. No, I'm not sure. I mean, it could be the sort of game where Graham Potter went to Arsenal and, didn't he? Could it be that sort of moment where Kjetil Knutsen... Is that the game where Kjetil Knutsen finally puts himself right on the radar of a huge job? Like, sometimes it takes that, right? To go to one of these big clubs and just deliver. And then the new year, there's matches in January, by the way. Buda Glimt, Maccabi Tel Aviv on the 23rd of January up in the Arctic Circle. I mean, God. And then they go to Nice, final game. And that's winnable at the minute. Nice are not that great. So I think they qualify, just a question of where, really now. Hats off. Malmo lost, unfortunately. I did watch this game against Olympiacos. Olympiacos, I do think they're an underrated team. No one ever gives them any credit. They're the bloody Conference League champions. But Malmo just looked limited. Do you know what I mean by that? It was the same against Rangers. I can't put my finger on it, Jonathan. It's like they weren't bad. It's just they were outclassed. They're outclassed, really, is the best way of saying it. Which can happen, but at home against Olympiacos, you might feel that they could do a little bit better. They were lucky not to lose by more than one goal. There was a late penalty missed. He didn't even hit the target, El Karbi. Dragged it wide. But Malmo never really looked like scoring in the game to me.
Malmo rotated, didn't they? They played Zakaria Lukili, young talent, 18 years old. He came out and said he felt like a 5-year-old kid when he was told he was going to be playing. But they seem to just rotate a lot, Malmo. We'll have a chat about them next week because they're probably going to wrap up the title if the game isn't, unless there's a bit of an upset or someone disrupts the match from ever happening. But we'll have a chat about Malmo, Steve. I think there are a few things to say. I think you've got a few things to say about Malmo, haven't you?
I'm just looking at that. Maybe they didn't target that game. I don't know. They won in Karabag. To be fair, that's a great win. I mean, that's a tough place to go. They've got on the sheet, they've got a trip to Besiktas, and they've also got Galatasaray at home, Ferencvaros away, Twente at home, and Slavia Prague away. I mean, there's fixtures there that you think that they could get points out of, to be fair, if they can play a bit better. A few things to say about Malmo, maybe on another day. And then, just as I said, the Vitória Guimarães against Djurgården. There was a decent goal scored, actually, by Djurgården in this fixture. A guy I'd never actually heard of. Trying to find his name now. But it was a nice, sweet hit to equalise for Djurgården. Stenson. Is it Daniel? Yeah, Daniel Stenson. I'd never honestly heard of him. In fact, it was his first start for 6 games. He'd been on the bench. Lovely hit. But Guimarães, I have heard from a few contacts out there in Portugal that they are their manager is one to watch. They're one of the best coach sides in Portugal, and I could see that, and they deserved it on the day. 2-1 win for Vitória Guimarães. But Djurgården didn't disgrace themselves at all. They put up a decent enough performance, I thought.
We'll wrap things up. I mean, I personally think Glimt will beat Manchester United away. The only reason that it might not happen might be a draw, but I don't think United will beat unless they go all out for it. I think Glimt will beat Man United. But how do you think, before we wrap up, that the extra European games, like you said, going into January, is going to impact Norwegian and Swedish teams? Because obviously their season will be done, and they'll still be technically in peak condition, more or less. Although the season ends in November for a Swedish team. So,
yeah,
what's your expert's take on that? Do you think that could be an advantage, or do you think that's going to be a disadvantage?
Yeah, Molde lost, by the way, to Ghent. It's normally an absolute graveyard whenever Norwegian teams travel to Belgium for whatever reason. I mean, the players aren't going to have the players aren't going to have much of a holiday, are they? When you think about it, I mean, the final league game. I'm just looking now for, say, Eliteserien. Sweden just finished obviously earlier. Godset Molde is on 12th of. Actually, it does finish earlier than normal. Am I reading this right? The 1st of December is the final league game this season. That's quite early. But then Molde, for example, they've got 2 more European games after the final league match in December. So 19th of December, and then they've got to come back again on 19th of Jan. So it's a quick Christmas, isn't it, this year for the players? They better not have too much Christmas pudding and turkey, because I'd imagine. What I would do, you just have to say to the players, guys, you're going to have a quick break here, but you've got to stay in shape. Otherwise, we're going to be, normally, I guess, pre-season fitness drills would be starting around that time, wouldn't they? But yeah, I don't know. That's a tough one, isn't it?
You talk about Norway, Steve. I mean, the league in Sweden ends 10th of November. So you've got Malmo. If you look at Malmo's fixtures, they've got Poikina on the last day of the season, 18-day break, and then they've got Ferencvaros away, like you said. Then they've got Malmo Galatasaray on the 12th of December. Then they got about a month's break till they play Twente at home in January. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be a challenge for fitness coaches, because you can't go on really holiday, can you? Because you're going to have to be match fit for those games. Are they going to play friendlies? Difficult, because the season's ended. You want a bit of a rest. Pre-season starts kind of like January-ish. And then they've got 30th of January an away game at Slavia Prague. So a bit of a challenging one there for coaches to think about, and fitness coaches. But listen, that's above our pay grade, Steve. We are not period.
Well, here's one. Just before we go off, right? The Icelandic team, Víkingur Reykjavik. Their league, they won't be playing a league. There's actually a big title decider in Iceland this coming weekend. Did you see that on Twitter? Massive. They're both on the same amount of points, Breiðablik and Víkingur. Anyway, that league, I don't think starts again until May. And I think they do have whatever cup games and stuff before. But they've got 4 more matches. The Conference League doesn't go into January, by the way, just Europa. But what? That's going to be a big challenge.
Wait.
Yeah.
They've only played 2 Conference League games so far.
They only play 6 games in the conference, not 8.
Huh?
I don't know why that is, but it is just 6 games in the conference. Is that news to you? Did you not know that?
Do you know what? I've hinted at it already, but I've tuned out of these competitions, to be honest. It's I can't just looking at the league table tires me out. I've had enough of it. I don't know what's going on in the Conference League, for example. They just need to make it up as they go along. But No,
Yeah.
I didn't know that. To be fair, I thought it was 8 games, and I was thinking the other day they've only played 2 games and it's nearly November. But there you go.
Vikingur against Djurgården is in December, the 12th of December, which is their last home game, and it's going to be starting at 1 o'clock. 2 p.m. local time on a Thursday, because they don't have the floodlights to work. They can't go into the evening up there or something like that. That's going to be an interesting game, isn't it? Vikingur Reykjavik against Djurgården. Looking forward to that one. But anyway, yeah, we've had a great episode. I think we'll have to call this one Stockholm Syndrome. There's been so much talk about it. But who's the prisoner and who's the capturer? I guess is.
I think the fans are prisoners. They're stuck in the ground. They can't leave.
It's been a pleasure as always. Let us know what you think. Like, do tweet at us or message us personally. What is the answer for the Stockholm derbies and, well, some of these Swedish football things in general with the crowd disturbances? What would your plan be? Would you relegate a team? Would you dock points, fines, no fans, whatever? So many different. I mean, be as radical as you want to be. Or
yeah, no, I have to say, Steve, thank you to the listeners who tweeted us or welcomed us back after the little break we've had. I did enjoy the comments and the sort of like messages I've had. It's nice. It's nice to hear that you enjoyed the show and that you missed us. But you've had back-to-back episodes now, so you might be sick of us already. But we'll be back. We've got a lot to talk about next week because a huge game. We haven't even talked about this weekend's game, Steve. Malmo could be champions. Big games in both leagues. We'll talk a lot more about Norway in the next episode. We've also got a few little treats for you coming up with. I've got an interview lined up, but I'm not going to say anything yet. So hit the subscribe button on that YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button on your Spotify or wherever you get your pods. Steve, keep on that treadmill or keep doing those upper body planks. Leave the pizzas to your cat, and we'll see you next time.
Yes, I'm looking forward to this interview. I know them Djurgården managers have got a lot to say, Jonathan. So let's see watch this space. Thank you very much.
Kim Bergstrand did agree to come on the show once when he was at Sirius, but we never.
Maybe he might want to tell his side of the story. If you ever want to, if anyone's listening, by the way, an aggrieved manager or coach who's got something to say, get in touch if you want. Well,
the last aggrieved manager we had was Sean Constable, and that was an explosive. That was an explosive interview, wasn't it? I mean, he really had a few things to say about Rosenborg in particular. But we've got one or two interviews lined up, especially for our patrons, and we just want to give a massive shout out to our patrons as always for the support, the moral support you've been providing. And we'll be back soon.
Yes, take care, everyone. See you next time, and have a great weekend. Goodbye. That was a good fun one, mate. That wasn't it?
Yeah, that was a good.